Enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedleholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussion. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and interesting conversations as they happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Curt, who is the Director of Special Collections and the manager of the Genealogy Center at the Allen County Public Library. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I want to start with understanding a little bit about your background and how your interest in library science and then how you sort of parlayed that into looking at special collections and more specifically genealogy.
Sure, absolutely. I don't think I am at all unique or unusual when I say that I didn't intend in my academic or work career to be a librarian initially. A lot of us come to what we call the side door. Some people even call it the back door. So I actually thought I wanted to teach. I've always had a real intellectual interest in history and biography. I really like to know why people settled where they settled. Like, why did this German community rise up in southern Indiana amidst clay and cornfields? Like, what drove that? So I've always had a really intense interest in history. As a little kid, the bookmobile used to stop right in front of our house, and I'd trundle over there, check out 2 or 3 biographies every week, week after week, year after year. So I liked biography and history, and I thought, well, I could teach. So I actually had an opportunity as part of the Franciscan seminary system to teach an academic semester at St. Catherine's Indian School in Santa Fe, and it was like, oh, this is exciting, and so I did it, and it's like, wow, Sarah, this is a lot of work. I don't think I want to do this. So I came back and said, well, I like history. I like the fact that, of sharing that excitement and sharing information and helping people be successful. I was like, well, let me just see what else I can do. So I started as a shelver in genealogy, just waiting to see what I could do. Took some more courses at then IPFW, now PFW. And I was like, I could modify this teaching thing and actually be a librarian or an archivist, and I chose librarian, and work in a field, genealogy, which is family history. And that's sort of how I got involved in genealogy. I thought I'd teach, and it's like, no, that classroom, the rigor of having such a wide range of people that you need to help all at the same time. Wide range is awesome, and I think we do that in the library system in general and in genealogy, but have 35 people, all different levels, all different interests, all at the same time. It's been a real nice discovery path, and I'm real glad that it happened, because I'm really passionate about what we call in the Genealogy Center the power of story. It can and does every day change people's lives, and in the big ways, but also in the small ways. Mm-hmm. And that I now feel more complete, or, oh, that makes sense why great-grandmother said this, why Grandma and Grandpa didn't talk to each other very much and didn't seem like they liked each other, but they stayed together their entire lives. I mean, just all kinds of answers. And there are some big things for kids. There is power in knowing that you are somebody. You count. You're not a nothing. You're not a number. You're not a little checkbox. You're a person, and you've been cried for and bled for and celebrated. And that just, it does something. Mm-hmm. Educators and psychologists, mm-hmm. It makes a person more fully human, more fully alive. And that's awesome to play in that arena where we can touch people's lives every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think talk more about the idea of this power of story, because most people think that genealogy is a lot of looking at databases and documents and, facts of finding, who came where and when and how they moved. And, it's a very much more a factual based as opposed to being able to collect and understand stories. So talk about that aspect of the whole genealogical process.
Sure, absolutely. So I think it's a stereotype that genealogy is just about begats and begots and nothing else in between. I don't think it was ever that way, but that lore kind of grew up. It's like, oh, a bunch of old people. That was never true. It's less true today with technology, but it was never true. And in fact, the lore was a bunch of old ladies doing begats and begots, and isn't that really exciting?
Right, because you always thought of like the daughters of the Revolution, or the daughters of the ones who came over in the Mayflower, and they can track their lineage back. Right, you always think it's, yeah.
But it was really never that way. And to really do good family history, to be successful in your genealogical pursuits, you must, and I don't often say must or have to, but you really must build the context. So, okay, you have a birth date. Where? Why there? And if you're born, you have to have a mother. That's
right.
kind of imperative.
Right, right.
And you probably have a father, whether it's the person who's wedded to the mother or
right.
with the mother. That's a whole nother story. So if you look at the word history, H-I, story. History is story. Mm-hmm. And it's so important, I believe, that people feel empowered and people have the tools and people network with each other to find the story. Mm-hmm. More and more so, people have really emphasized that I can do better research, I can feel like I know my ancestors, and I can know myself better if I know the story. Mm-hmm. Not ironically, Sarah, in the genealogical proof standard, thing number one, item number one, checkbox number one is find all available data.
Right.
Not just dates, not just things that are on the big information aggregators. Oh, I did Ancestry, MyHeritage, and Find My Past, I got it all. No, you got the big boys, but right. What about the local history and the stories and the other documents and the deeds and the probates and the family Bibles and the conversations that you have with ancestors, with the descendants of ancestors, so that you get to know those ancestors. You won't know your ancestors with birth, marriage, and death, but you'll know them through all the context and through conversations with their descendants.
I mean, obviously, you know, keeping track of lineage and families, like through family Bibles, and there's even like the ones in the UK, you know, like in The Crown, they talked about, they go back to see how someone was related to, I mean, there have been volumes of these books and stuff, but it seems like in the last really 20 years, there seems to be more of a really large interest in genealogy, and I'm wondering if that's partly because of technology, because of Ancestry.com, you know, the DNA sites like 23andMe, you know, all of the other, you know, online resources that help you. Because like with 23andMe, you talk about people finding out that like maybe their father had an affair because they meet someone who was a relative that no one knew about, or they find out that their biological mother wasn't their mother. I mean, there's all kinds of things that come up from that. But I'm wondering what role you see that technology in general has played over the last really, you know, I would say 20 years to really define and make genealogy not just this, you know, field of study for librarians and academics, but really a tremendous interest and access to mainstream individuals. Yeah,
great question, Sarah. And again, I'm going to draw a thread from the past that there was always great interest, but you're right, it's exponentially more people involved today. And you identified the number one driver. There was always interest, but people couldn't take the time off to physically travel somewhere to look at a record. Now you travel to your keyboard, or you travel to your smart device, and you can look at billions, not millions, billions of records. So technology is the number one driver, and sort of a subset, as you just identified, technology in using DNA results to actually identify whether or not this is a relationship, a biological relationship. So technology is huge. Mapping of the human genome, that whole DNA thing, really, really huge. Some other things are, I think, really consequential as well. not meaning to draw science in too much because I'm not a scientist, I don't know science that well, but I believe I'm pulling from my early undergraduate days that I think there's a principle that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So all of the free love, broken families, families aren't important, nuclear family, that's so yesterday, we don't need to worry about that, we just need to love each other, that whole 60s, 70s thing. We are living with the ramifications of that today. We're living with millions, not billions, but millions of people throughout the world who want to find birth siblings, who want to find birth parents, who want to find birth children. The individuals who gave people up for adoption, you know, that was the right decision then. And now they want to find out how those people are doing. A lot of adoptees, there's this understanding, which is partially true, that adoptees want to find birth parents and parents want to find birth children. Not saying that isn't true. Certainly there are many instances of that. But equally consequential is adoptees want to find siblings. They want to find half siblings, full siblings. I mean, there's a real drive there that's almost never talked about. It's always that mother-child, father-child relationship, and that's important. And people do quest after that. But equally strong is, can I talk to my sibs? And then, you know, it goes through the whole family tree. Do I have nephews and nieces that I don't know about? So, you know, kind of completing their story. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about completing their story. So that's a big driver. The fact that more and more educators are saying, I can make history more relevant in the classroom if I make it personal. How do you make it personal? You can make it personal in a couple of really, I think, cool ways. One, Wayne Newtek does this really great in the Fort Wayne area. They focus on local businesses, local activities. So they did a project a couple years ago called Amazing Race Fort Wayne, where part of that amazing race was identifying corporations and businesses and who started them and what are the ties from those businesses to other states, to other countries, and they kind of mapped out this amazing race. It was awesome. And it was like these kids were geeked about history. How often do you find middle schoolers, high schoolers geeked about history? Well, it was personal.
I mean, that's what I was going to really tap into, because it doesn't seem that children today and teens are interested in history. Everything is more immediate, present, you know, and some things aren't even, they don't even last for permanent. You know, look at TikTok, it's 30 seconds or something. So this idea of it making it relevant to them. But I think also to your point about, you said, like, why did somebody be born or why were they in this area? I'm always interested because usually it's clusters of businesses. Like, why were all of these, why are, you know, companies like setting up here? Or why are there certain types of companies that set up in this area? You know, and usually there's a reason for it in the history. And I find that that's also really interesting. But I think you're right. For kids, I think it does make it personal. I mean, we all had to do, I mean, I remember, you know, in elementary school, we all had to do that basic family tree, you know, and you can only go back so far. I mean, I sort of believe you have about you're in existence and knowledge base for you as the part of your family for about one generation. And then people forget you. And then, you know, because everybody has these boxes of photos that you have no idea who these people are. And, you know, and you think you're going to collect all these stories from your parents and grandparents, and you don't. So I think that that's really part of the appeal to this, you know, is to go back. I mean, like, you know, even my own parents, I mean, my dad, he can go back to like my great grandparent, but that's about it, you know, and partly because, you know, they didn't talk about it. They also spoke a different language. I mean, lots of reasons, but I think that that's really important. But talk about, you know, you talk about this idea of, for people, about knowing their history and where they're from and their place in society, or that they matter. Why do you think that that's such a driving force for people?
Great question, and I'm not an expert in that arena, but I've played in it for a long time. So there are sociologists and educators in the last 5 years to a decade who have really started kind of focusing in on, there's something here. And so what I can say that it's been in the literature, both the psychological sociology field and the education field, is the idea of conversation and storytelling activates almost all parts of one's brain. So we know that physiologically, story and conversation, as it's related to family, context, life, work, activates almost more of your brain, get this, Sarah, than any other human activity. When I heard that, I thought, I know a lot of human activities, and they're telling me that storytelling, sitting with relatives at a reunion, sitting across a table like you and I are, activates as much or more of my brain than any other, and they're saying yes. And then educators and sociologists are saying, and they're trying to figure out all the pieces, but a child in elementary school who can just name her or his 4 grandparents. Not their birthdays, not their life story, not their biography, not 3 photographs of them, just their names. And they've tracked this over time. Make friends more easily, are more accepting of diversity and change at every stage of their life, are more able to deal with crises or negative things and find a way out, find a positive, score better on their tests, and land better jobs in life. I wish I knew why at every one of those steps, but if this is what the experts in the field are saying, then I'm going to say or ask a real pedestrian question. Why not family history? I mean, if that's what they're saying, that if we can just let them know their 4 grandparents' names, why not? I mean, that seems to be a clear path to success. They've delved deeper in some of those silos, Sarah, where they can say, you know, parents who talk to kids or grandparents who talk to grandchildren about their life, right, even the negative parts. And a story I like to tell, which is completely fictitious, but it was used as an example to let people know how stark this is. Right. Let's say that, you know, I was in a relay race and we had an awesome team. I was the anchor person the first 3 legs of the race. You know, I had a great lead, and on the handoff of the baton, I dropped it. And not only did I drop it, I kicked it when I was trying to pick it up. So I had to run like 10 yards in the wrong direction, pick up the baton, and then run in the right direction, and I lost the race. Our team didn't even place. We were 1 and we didn't even place in the race. The hypothesis that the sociologists say is that a child hearing that story doesn't take away for a long time. Oh my God, Dad really screwed up that race. Oh, that's terrible. Oh gosh, I feel so bad for you. Yeah, that may be some of the conversation, some of the initial emotion, but growing out of that is, that was terrible, and Dad's still here. Right. And Dad's talking to me about it, and you know. Right. Right. He survived, he thrived, he made it through that. So, I guess it's not really that bad. Right. We don't really know the power of story. Right. I mean, I also think, like for my niece and nephew, my sister's kids, I used to tell them stories about their great-grandmother Tilly and all the different things that she did, and you know, and then I used to also tell them a lot of stories about their mother when she was little, and sort of because also I believe that's how you keep people with you, you know, to, you know. But with my sister, I used to always I used to do this remembrance of the day, because I have a very good memory of things. So I would call her up and say, "Do you remember this?" And then the other interesting, I think, is when you hear your siblings' stories or anecdotes of the same things, you realize that you did not grow up in the same house. Like my brother, sister, and I we're all 2 years apart. I'm the youngest. We absolutely did not grow up in the same house, because each has their own perception and what they thought interacted, and then there were times that they interacted with my parents that I had no idea about. And so I think it's keeping people alive in those stories and memories, and especially, you know, because in Judaism you name children after somebody who's who's died. So I think giving them why and who that person was, and I think is really important, because it does sort of show that you're, you know, sort of part of this chain. Right.
you know, so I can, and gives you that, I think in some cases, maybe it gives you that sense of place,
Yes.
you know, that you, so you sort of know, okay.
I am somebody. When people hear that, they appropriately associate it with Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition and the awesome work that they did. He was wise to pick that because that is powerful and so many levels, Sarah. I am somebody. I've been named after somebody. I know this story. I am part of this family, this tribe, this group of people. Yeah, I am somebody is a powerful thing for people to internalize.
So obviously, I mean, the Genealogical Center has been part of the Allen County Fort Wayne Museum way before you came and took it on. Tell me more about why the Allen County Public placed, you know, this emphasis, and then how it really grew into this very much a worldwide recognized center. And also tell me some of the types of materials and things and how you do it, like, you know,
Sure.
if someone comes to you.
Sure. So why Fort Wayne, which always surprising to me, pre-COVID when I did a lot more traveling, and you'd meet people in different airports and, you know, strike up a casual conversation, and you say Fort Wayne. Most people put that in Texas. Fort Wayne, I'm from Fort Wayne. Oh yeah, I know, that's in North Texas. Like, no, that's Fort Worth. This is Fort Wayne, North Indiana. But yeah, why Fort Wayne? So I really like the story. It just shows, and I can be kind of a contrarian, and I'll own that. I think there's a lot of joy and a number of extra smiles one can find in life being a little bit of a contrarian. So then director in the mid-20th century, Fred J. Reynolds, decided that genealogists were a discriminated class of library customers, library patrons, particularly in public libraries. And Sarah, he was kind of true, because genealogists are atypical patrons. A patron comes in, they browse for the latest Western, the latest popular book, a Supreme Court case, a business plan. They find it, they copy it, check it out, and they do that blessed thing. They leave. Genealogists are like, whoa, you have books here on genealogy? They're power users. They use a lot of books. They ask a lot of questions. They tire out, in the 20th century, they tire out traditionally trained librarians, because it was like, oh my gosh, you're back at my desk again? You're asking me another question again? And so Fred was like, this is not right. Everybody has a story, and you know, you can do genealogy if you just have a little bit of help. So he wanted to have a department where not only did the librarians know how to spell genealogy, which is a trick. There are not two O's in genealogy, but oftentimes you find it that way. But also knew how to do family history, knew how to do genealogy. And oh my gosh, sir, that was like a match to dry wood. It just took off. A local DAR donated thousands of books. Other people donated books. And Fred was like, wow, and people are coming. Lots of people are coming, not just Fort Wayne, Allen County residents, but Northeast Indiana, and then the tri-state area, then the quad state area, and then people were making summer vacation trips here, and it was like, wow, I've just made a destination in my zeal to serve a class of library patrons well. That was really his prime objective, almost his sole objective. He was interviewed, and I wish I could find this interview, and it may be in the archive of Access Fort Wayne. He was interviewed once about, wow, he must be pretty proud, Fred, because you must have used the collection a lot. You must really like family history and genealogy. And of his era, he was a pretty sober-looking guy, and so it was like, no, actually, I think genealogy is kind of silly. And the interviewer was like, what? It's like he really didn't care about doing it. Mm-hmm. He didn't do it for personal gain. He didn't do it. He just did it because he thought for public library service, with everyone so interested. This was 10 years before the bicentennial, 10 years before Alex Haley's Roots. Fred Reynolds said, wow, there's a lot of people interested in this, and we should help these library patrons be successful. And again, it just took off like kindling that's been exposed to a flame. Right. It just burst, and the collection has grown a lot, both in number of patrons who use the collection and in number of assets.
Right. So talk about some of the more unusual assets you have? Like, you have collections of photographs, I mean, and postcards, and what are some of the more unusual things that people wouldn't realize that are part of a genealogical collection and that are there to use?
Sure. Great question, and I probably have a pretty lousy answer because none of it is unusual to us.
Right.
But I get your question. So while it sounds a little complicated to say this, anything that puts a person in a place at a time doing something is fair game. So we have history, anything. So we'll have a town history, a township history, a county history, a church history, a business history, a family history. So all that is fair game. Most public library genealogy collections will really constrict that to, okay, just this town or
right.
just this county. And based on how the collection was started, it was like, no, we're an international collection. We collect for North America, British Isles, Eastern Western Europe. Anything. So we have firefighter scrapbooks because they have people and when they served and that they were in this town. Some firefighters' records actually give the political party of the firefighters, which is like, wow, that's kind of interesting. They wouldn't do that today, but back 50 years ago.
Right.
Yearbooks of all kinds, church, school, business, yearbooks, anything that a family puts together that tells their story. So there may be lots of pictures in there. There may be copies of artifacts. The family chalice that came over from England, the wedding accoutrement that has been passed down through the generations. So if they can package that either digitally in a video, in a searchable database, in an actual image, we will post that for free use on our website.
And do you also post or have the findings, like, because certain people have the same last name, like O'Neill, and then so let's say, Lori O'Neill, she traced her, family, and then do you have that as well so that other people with that last name could see, or start to see any connections, and so that it also makes it easier, or that might be a branch of your tree, or...
Short answer is yes. I just feel compelled, Sarah, to say that we make all this information available electronically with permission. We don't violate anyone's privacy, and we certainly do respect all the intellectual property rights and copyright laws. So if people want to allow us to acquire a book for our collection and they want it to sit on the shelf, so whoever comes in for an O'Neill family, here's all the O'Neills in the same area, we catalog them so they all rest in the same area, they can do that. If they give us permission, we'll also put a copy online.
Got it.
But we won't put it online without their permission. Right. There's a lot of material that's in the public domain. So we have two great digitizing partners, Family Search and Internet Archive. And between the two of them, there's about 150,000 books from the Genealogy Center online, 24/7, freely available for people to use. COVID, pandemic times or not.
Right.
That you, at 2 o'clock in the morning, anywhere in the world, even on the space station, if they have a few extra moments, you can hop online and you can see, an O'Neill family history that's on the Internet Archive, or a Jasper, Indiana, my hometown, and you can see the little county history, or the St. Joseph Catholic Church records, or the synagogue records from Indianapolis. You can see all of that. That's available online.
And you have certain records that you can use anywhere, and then you have other databases that you just can use here.
Correct.
So
Correct.
So this, of course, begs the question that obviously I think your interest in history and your family's history was more than your predecessors. So tell me what the process was like for you, and how you went about learning about your story, and what sort of surprised you.
Great question, Sarah, and it's one I answer with just a bit of hesitancy, because there really wasn't anything that surprised me, because I had to know something first to be surprised. And I think I'm like so many people whose parents didn't talk about the past. A question we get at least several times a day, sometimes almost like machine gun fire. I don't know anything. No one told me anything. No one talked about it. And my parents talked about nothing. So every time we get a new database, it's like, I search even my parents' names. I'm a number of generations back, but I go, Charles and Doris Witcher. I search their names, and with few exceptions, Sarah, I find something new every time. And some of it is even like, oh, you told me this, and it's really that. My father, for example, didn't want us kids, I don't know why, I still don't know why, he's been deceased 7 years, didn't want us involved in any school extracurricular activities. And it's like, well, I guess because he didn't, and he was from a very small and poor family in southern Indiana. So every time there's a newspaper database, they come to, it's like, oh my gosh, he was involved in school plays. He was an Eagle Scout. I never knew that. He never told. I never saw any sashes, pins, anything, certificates, nothing. And it's like, here in the paper, he's an Eagle Scout. My mother talked about nothing from her growing up except that how poor they were, how hungry they were many years because they didn't have enough food, and how she and her two sisters slept 3 to a bed. And that wasn't necessarily unusual, but I mean, and that was it. So the latest newspaper database we got, which was a number of years ago, you know, Doris Englert. Like, up pops this, and you know, I'm biased, I'll admit that. She was a gorgeous young lady. Up pops this gorgeous picture of Doris Witcher in the Comet. Like, what the heck's the Comet? Well, the Comet was the Jasper High School newspaper. And it's like, they never talked about that. She's on the front page, is winning some kind of writing contest. But on the back page, it's her and a bunch of girls. And you know, she never mentioned anything about that. And so, yeah, you find that people have, where do I go from here, kind of a thing. And my parents literally, I knew my grandparents' names, and that's it. They didn't talk about their grandparents. They didn't talk about growing up. When my parents, this was a number of years ago, like many decades, knew that I had started in the genealogy center, my dad's comment was, oh, what do you want to do that for? That's just a bunch of foolishness. Well, you know, it's history. It's kind of, I've always been interested in this. Like, no surprise to you, I've always been interested in this. And yeah, so my family history came about as this quest to know my story. And I have to own this little part too, Sarah. Because they didn't talk about anything, gave me just that much more zeal to figure out, why aren't you talking about this? And I haven't found like any, people talk about the proverbial skeleton in the closet. I haven't found any of that, but it's like, so Dad, you know, you were an Eagle Scout. Would have been nice to know, but okay, you didn't. But now I do. That's kind of cool.
But does it still make you question why he didn't want you to do after school?
Absolutely, absolutely. And he was in a play. He was a leading role in a play. He did mention that he did well academically. And so I did find, you know, the honor roll in small town newspapers. They publish every quarter. So they publish the honor roll people, grade by grade. You know, freshmen, sophomore, juniors. So it will always be a question.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember when I was in high school, I went to boarding school, and I went to the JFK library, and in his school years, they had like his actual report card from the same boarding school I went to, and it was very interesting to see like his grades, because you know, like, you know, who were the teachers, and he had to take the same classes I did, and so you can see, you know, I think sometimes though, kids, they don't appreciate it with their parents, because, you know, it's always like that, I had to walk 5 miles in the snow to get to school, and blah, blah, blah.
Uphill both ways,
And, you know, they don't, it's not the, it's not necessarily, it's more relevant to your life of why you can and cannot do things, not necessarily more about building this rich story. So I think, but as you think about, you know, the idea of genealogy and in the 21st century, there's something else that's interesting that's going on now that I believe you're very involved in, which is the Rowland Center for it's for the resource of legacy of Abraham Lincoln that's being developed. So can you talk about that and how you really thought about it from a historical perspective, what you were creating there, from a genealogical perspective, and then also from a technological perspective?
Right. So I can quickly dispense with one of those.
Okay.
We didn't think a lot about the genealogical part of it. It is an awesome collection, though, to discover Abraham Lincoln's genealogical history, genealogical heritage. It's a very good collection for that. We were more focused on the uniqueness of the collection and working with partners, both locally and throughout the state, to make sure that the collection stayed here and then that the collection would be a 21st century experience. So I'm going to talk just a tad bit out of school. I'm not a museum curator, and I'm intentionally in public libraries and not in museums because I like the high traffic of public libraries. I like the engagement. What we do say in the Genealogy Center, we've said this for a couple of decades now, we have, Sarah, just awesome materials. We license all the major databases. We have 1.2 million physical items. We have an extremely talented team, very, very talented, just proud to come to work every day. That means nothing. Those three things mean nothing if our patrons don't have a good experience. So it really is all about the experience. So when we looked at the Rowland Center, we said, with Ian Rowland at the helm, a former director, State Museum, we built a partnership where, Sarah, we competed against the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, Gettysburg Foundation, the Lincoln Presidential Library in Springfield, saying, hey, Lincoln Financial, if you're going to give this collection, give it to this partnership between Allen County Public Library and the Indiana State Museum. And we will not only curate at the best museum level, but we will create a 21st century experience. So the Rowland Center is almost, not quite, evenly divided between great ways of displaying the rich, wonderful artifacts, books and photographs from the original Lincoln collection, but half of it is a virtual experience where you can walk up to a kiosk and you can say, I want to know more about the inauguration trek that Abraham Lincoln took from Springfield to the White House. You can press a button and up pops a display that shows you the path, and you can touch cities where he stopped and it shows you more artifacts from the collection. It's kind of like create your own adventure. We have, with the Lincoln Financial Foundation collection, we have the Lincoln Family Album. It's unique to all the world. There's no other one. There's a whole section where you can walk up to a kiosk and say, I want to know more about Mary Todd. You just touch a button, and up on the wall, floor to ceiling, is Mary Todd. And then down here on the kiosk, you can say, I've never seen that picture. You touch it, it's up on the wall. You say, well, I want to know about her family. Touch the helmet, it's up on the wall. It's like create your own adventure. So we think that a 21st century experience is more engaging. The look, read the caption, and move on is a very yesteryear experience. It's important, and it's foundational, but it's very yesteryear. We want that, plus we want technology to keep people coming back. I want to take a deeper dive on this. I want to take a look at the first 5 pages of this book that Lincoln actually held in his hand, Sarah, and actually made colored pencil highlights in the section of the book. I mean, that is more of an experience rather than just a passive read the caption, look at the image, and move on. I think both are important. In the 21st century, I think the create your own adventure kind of experience, leveraging technology to make people excited about what's there and meeting the needs of more diverse people, diverse in how they learn. You know, there are visual learners and tactile learners.
And audio learners.
And we've known that for years, right?
Yeah.
Why do we keep doing the same thing in museums? We're not addressing all. So we're trying to have a true 21st century experience. And that's been what's really been exciting to me. So in a very small footprint, but still a very great footprint. It's kind of on Main Street at the library, literally on Main Street. There's 4,200 square feet of engagement where you can look at really neat things, and then you can actually create your own adventure with some of those.
Do you think that that's caused you to really rethink what the library should be for the 21st century? Like, because you said, originally the idea of the library, you come, you look up something, in the card catalog, and you find it, you check it out, and you leave. And now, of course, with books being, digitized or in some ways obsolete, although I don't think they are, but the idea of what a library does and its purpose in a community, and especially with technology. So by working with the Genealogical Society Center, and then also with the Elin Rowland for the Lincoln Collection, has that changed sort of your thinking or what you think the library should be for the 21st century?
I'll preface this quickly by saying these comments, as well as all my other comments, are biased, so I'll just lay that out on the table. I'm going to answer your question, no, because I believe this library, in the, won't say how long, but more than 4 decades that I've been with this library has always been about that. In the 1980s, some of the Friends of the Library organizational and what the director at the time, Rick Ashton, said, there was always this concept of more than books. Not that books are ever going to go away. I don't think they will. This whole thing of a paperless office, you're going to read everything on your smart device, no. There will always be a place for books. And there are more books being published today than ever. If there wasn't any money into it, Random House, Time Warner, they wouldn't be chugging out these books. So people like to hold things in their hand. They like to be able to flip quickly through the pages.
Mark it out.
Exactly. There'll always be a need for books. But it's not an on or off switch. It's not an either or. And this library has been great about that. Where we're sitting in Access Fort Wayne, we were back in the 80s, it was called something different, but you didn't find that in a library, but you found it here. We've always emphasized programming, bringing books to life, bringing people together to discuss. So it's not just book-based programming, but theme-based programming, community interest-based programming. We're doing more programming now than we ever have. One of my colleagues, who's the director of community engagement, put together a little quarterly report on our reach into the community. Tens of thousands of people engaging with this library at story times, at virtual programming, Rock the Plaza. I mean, this community has always been.
And that's not just the downtown branch. I mean, it's a network of branches that gets, and really when you talk about, they talk about being entrenched and hyper-local and in neighborhoods. That's what libraries are for.
Right. And that's what the library has always been. So back in the 80s and 90s, they did a study of where branches should be. Right now, we're engaged in a facility master plan. Again, that same concept. Do we have the right physical things in the right places? And are we doing the right services to address the needs of the community?
Because certainly they have to look at, as Fort Wayne is sort of growing northwest and southwest, and I mean it's expanding out, not from the core. So that, and I also think that a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the resurgence and revitalization of downtown Fort Wayne came from the commitment of the library to build the downtown branch, and said, we are going to build our branch and put these incredible programs and services in downtown Fort Wayne, when it wasn't this, what it is now, vibrant. And so I think that's really, important, that the library. But I just wonder, also, like you talk about other things that you could check out, or things at the library. Like there's the library of things. Right. Like there's all these other things that you can.
The seed library and the library of things,
that you can check out, board games, and I mean, obviously for kids, there's all kinds of online, videos and DVDs, and then they have those sets. I love them, the play sets, where you can check out that they give you everything to do something like plant or make believe or something like that. And then even within the genealogy center, you have the Life Stories project. So that, going back, now we're going full circle to stories. Talk about that and how that's another way of bringing to life stories, and not necessarily using things that are the printed word or from a printed or technology-oriented database. Talk about that and what that brings to the library and the whole history.
Sure. So the Life Stories is always a work in progress. When we first rolled it out, we had some really nice recording equipment where you could just set one little box, I call it a box, in the middle of the table, bi-directional recorder, could edit things and really clean up so the sound is really clear. Now our smart devices are excellent recording devices. So we just continue to encourage people through that physical existence to sit down and have conversations and maybe take away some questions, some ways of interviewing people, some ways of just having a conversation that can lead to all kinds of rich stories. And we encourage people to share that. Many people use the Life Story Centers to get ideas, to get little kind of cheat sheets of questions. We point them to our website where we have hundreds of life stories linked. And a lot of them choose not to share that this is me for my family, but they like the fact that they can come here and talk to people about how to do it well or how to put some of the pieces together. Those who want to share their story, we welcome that, and we'd like to have a place for them to do that. The Lasting Lawyer Legacy locally, I mean, that was a partnership that the library had with and has with the Allen County Bar Association. And so it's neat to hear how these lawyers and judges, how they grew up, the challenges they faced, things you just never knew about them. And they're not scandalous things, but just like, oh, so like, you were an avid basketball player, or yeah, you like to get in fights in school, and now you're a magistrate. I mean, it's just like, wow, you're a human being too. You have wants and needs and desires and disappointments, just like everybody else. There's another great partnership we have with a local person, Bruce Buck, who has started this Indiana Super Achievers, where he's interviewing successful business people, and he's actually interviewed the current governor and a former governor. And it's just neat to hear those stories. So here's like these big icons in the community, and you know, they talk about study and work and networks and community and giving back and friendships. I mean, it's small I inspiring, if not large I inspiring to
well, you could argue that that's exactly what this is. Why I did And Good Company is to have these kinds of conversations, and also for people that people don't know about, or people who are doing interesting things, or you know, everyday people, or I mean, that's the whole idea, is to sort of have this conversation where you can be part of it and not just going for the traditional sound bite or you know, an understanding. I think that is important, and so I think we need more of it. You know, but I also think I've been working on collecting this for this documentary I'm working on for the history of the Fort Wayne Jewish community from 1921 to 2021. And what I really realized is that you can't wait to sit down and talk to your family, because there's so much. I mean, so many of the people that I have interviewed for this are over the age of 80. And so what they remember and they don't remember, but the stories and who they knew and how they are all connected. I mean, we joke that a lot of it, what I found is a lot of success has been, there's been a lot of marriages, especially in the retail in Fort Wayne, of different families connecting. But what you also realize is that everybody got help. There's a lot of people who started businesses, including some of the scrap metal businesses that have then gone on to become part of actually what started as Superior Iron Works, which then became OmniSource, which was started because the two gentlemen uncle gave them the $8,000 to buy the scrap metal yard, or someone else gave someone $500 to start a store. So what you also can see is sort of how other people, you know, help people, and it's not, you know, a lot of it is family and who supports you, but you also lose a lot by not getting these stories. And the other thing I find for companies, like, they don't value their archives anymore or their history. And so many people that turn over and they sort of forget why they were started and the mission, you know, so, you know, they don't know. I mean, you know, you look at like the Fort Wayne Museum of Art is 100 years this year. The Fort Wayne History Center is 100 years. Next year, the Community Foundation will be 100 years. United Way. I mean, you don't realize all of these, and there's no sense of the history, you know, and who came before and why they did certain things. And so I think it is very important in whichever way you can capture them. I just think video is more compelling today because people like it.
Right.
But it is important to capture the history and the understanding and also put it into context. I mean, I think that's, you know, and so I'm also curious, what do you think about, I've been talking to a history professor who I've had on, Jeffrey Webb, and he's actually going to come back to talk about this idea between heritage and history. And how, like, with a lot of the taking down of a lot of the Civil War Confederate, you know, monuments, or rethinking about who we name streets after, and, you know, that, you know, anytime you do anything after a person, there's a risk. But this idea of trying to change our history or eradicate part of our history or rewrite it, what's your sense of is doing that, and you know, what role do you think that I mean, you can't change the history,
right?
But what do you think about that in terms of also like people trying to change their family stories, or you know, where they came from, or why is that this sense of wanting to change our history?
I don't think I'm qualified, really, Sarah, to answer that question. I'm going to answer it with a statement that says we should have conversations. We should have conversations. So to a couple of your points, I'm going to guess, and I think it's a pretty solid hypothesis, that from the beginning of time, people have wanted to emphasize the positive and write out the negative. I don't know if that's human nature. I don't know whether that's just, you know, we're genetically coded to do that. I don't know whether that's a survival thing, only accentuate that which gets you further. I don't really know. I haven't studied that. But I think we do need to have conversations about what we do, how we preserve our stories. Because I have a past that contains chapters that I am personally uncomfortable with, that are politically incorrect now, that maybe have always been politically incorrect, that were opportunistic for a certain segment at a time. I include those in my family history. I don't include those in my family history. I personally think there's no bad history if you're recording what happened, if you're recording as close to fact as you can find, as you can evaluate. The bad history, if there is that, is me creating something. If my family owns slaves, and I create a story that completely writes out slave ownership, selling of human beings, that's a bad, I've violated historical research practices. I think we should own our history. The manifestation of that history, I think that needs some more conversation.
Well, the context of it, the context of the time, the context of why certain words were used or what happened. I mean, I think you can't look at it in a vacuum. It has to be within the context. Right. Right.
But you asked specifically about like taking down statues.
Or people who want to rewrite their history, you know. I just think, and so, you know, if someone, so what do you need to get started? Like, okay, you know, I want to start with my family, you know, start diving into the, what do you need? I mean, do I have to come with like certain documents? What do I need?
Yeah. So today, in 2021, in the 21st century, we are so fortunate, Sarah, because we just need to walk in or sit down at our computer or sit down with cousins, family members, brothers, sisters. Really, as one of my colleagues likes to say, it all starts with a question. I mean, literally, Sarah. So your question might be, I just don't know anything about my mother's parents, grandparents. There's your question. So with that question, you say, okay, I know my mother's name. Given name, maiden name. There's databases you can tap. There's colleagues in the genealogy center you can ask. There's Facebook groups you can get on to say, point me, show me which records. And you yourself, there's so much out there available for free. Ancestry's awesome. Some people say Ancestry's expensive. Some people say it's worth it. I'm not even going to enter that debate. They have 30 billion searchable records, 30 billion. You can't ignore them. But
and do you have, does the library have a...
Absolutely.
So we can come here and use it for free, right?
Yeah, come to the main library or all 14 of the branches. I mean, all of them. 13
So the
branches, main library.
databases that you have, the ones that are available online, you can use anywhere, and the ones that are available at the library, you can get those at any of the
location,
branch.
right. So if the main library isn't convenient, we love to see people in the genealogy center because we have staff specially dedicated
Right.
and trained to help people find their stories. But you can, your neighborhood branch, you know, you have an extra 30 minutes sometime between appointments, you can just hop in there, hop on a computer and do some searching. So it all starts with a question. I want to find out more. And then once you find out more about the person or persons or family group that you're interested in, that usually leads to the next question or round of questions. I think some people are intimidated because it's like, oh my gosh, Ancestry can be really intimidating.
Yeah.
You put in anything and you'll get hundreds of thousands of search
Right.
results. But it's just start with a question and see where it leads. There's always someone in the genealogy center every hour the library is open that can help you find that first question and then help you navigate
Right.
an answer to that question.
Well, in my attempt to learn more and ask questions or start with questions, at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game. What is your favorite word?
Hope.
What is your least favorite word?
Sad.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Wow, so many things turn me on. Being with good people.
What turns you off? Spiritually, creatively, or emotionally?
Yeah. Being with downers.
What sound or noise do you love?
I love Neil Diamond's sound.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Construction. Jackhammers.
What
Pavers.
profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think I'd still like to be a teacher in some environment. Even though I think I am a teacher here.
What profession would you not like to do?
I don't think I'd like to be a preacher. Minister, pastor, rabbi.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
I know this sounds really trite, and I apologize for that, but because I've been so immersed in it since 2009, when the collection came to us, it would be awesome to have a conversation with Abraham Lincoln. Because I heard he has a really funny voice, too, so that would even be more awesome. So he doesn't have the expected voice, so even more awesome.
How would you like to die?
In my sleep.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Your family's over there.
Well, I want to thank Curt Witcher, the Director of Special Collections and Manager of the Genealogy Center at the Allen County Public Library, for having a seat at our table today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.